Welcome to another episode of the Middle West podcast. I'm your host, Taqi Musa. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. I'm joined by my co-host, Hamda Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum.
Hello.
And we're
Walaikum
joined
salam.
today by our guest, who's a law graduate, a very cool hipster dresser, and also very active on Twitter as well as on kind of activist circles and on the ground with different movements, but in particular recently with the BLM movement. So we're joined by young Malcolm on Twitter, but also Momodou Taal. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa
Thank you
barakatuh.
very much for your time. I saw on your Facebook you've been all over the country recently, trying to kind of organize different protests with your everything very lockdown compliant. So you've got
Exactly.
your mask
That's
and
all.
everything on.
Trying to observe social distancing. Trying.
Yeah.
How did that go?
Failed miserably, but alhamdulillah.
I thought that counts.
You know, we've got Dominic Cummings. You only did it to check your eyesight.
Exactly. Exactly.
Therefore, it's all fine.
I'm following in the footsteps of the government.
I guess this is your background really struck me as something very interesting. That's what I want to start with before we get into into discussing the protests themselves. Your background is very interesting because you are a London-based, but often in Birmingham, law student.
London raised, but it's hard to say. It's really hard. It's really difficult.
I mean, it's hard enough within the UK, but then you're living in Egypt now.
Cairo,
so
but I'm in the UK at the moment.
Yeah, so you chose to go abroad to study Sharia, which is, I think, it's a rare thing anyway, but it's becoming even rarer to have people actually go abroad to study Sharia, and especially to do so with a kind of with your kind of background, or a lot of people who go are like very one-minded, single-minded, or kind of this is their area and that's all they're going for, whereas you have a lot more facets to your personality, and then also on Instagram you're called the Gambian.
Yes.
So which I think is your kind of ethnic background.
Yeah.
So how does this kind of, can you give us a little bit of an overview of how all of this activism started, but also what pursued you to then take this to the next level and go to Egypt to study Sharia?
It's like, looking back on hindsight, it really does kind of make sense. But at the time, I would never have predicted it. Looking back, I'm going from a point of, I grew up in London, and I grew up on a typical like estate. I got into trouble with the law a couple of times, and I was a very naughty kid growing up. And then I moved to Birmingham because one of my friends was murdered when I was 13. So my mom said she kind of wanted me to get out of the area and move to Birmingham. So we moved to Birmingham, and then I was initially inspired by the election campaign of Barack Obama. And I was like, oh, wow, the first black president. Oh, my God, this is dope. So I just remember being on Google. I Googled youth politics in the UK. And then I was directed to the UK Youth Parliament. And then I stood for elections in my school. And I stood in the campaign of like knife crime and systemic racism and institutionalized racism. So my kind of thing about, talking about race issues has started from that point. Fast forward to like me running for this campaign. This was kind of like my first ever encounter with up close racism in school, because I remember being, I had my, on the campaign sheet, had like, all the kind of candidates for the election were listed. And then I kind of went around school getting votes. Then one of the kids said to me, I was 15, so I was in year 10 in the UK. So one of the kids said to me, bearing in mind, my school was an area and it wasn't a predominantly white school, but it was a predominantly white area. So as I would go to school every morning, you'll find people in their windows, BNP's winning here. We support the EDL in this house, like very openly. So as I was in school, the kid said to me, I'm going to look for the white face to vote for. And I said, oh, and me trying to be like, I'm coming from a background where I'm not diplomatic. So I'm like, you know what, let me just try, let me know, I've read Malcolm X, I've watched Barack Obama, let me try and be quote unquote more professional. I said, but I'm also British, so why wouldn't you vote for me? Then the kid says to me, well, if a dog's born in a stable, doesn't make it a horse. So I was just like, wow, okay. Then that, you can imagine, I completely flipped out. And then, at lunchtime, we got into a little fight. But then that wasn't the end of it. The end of it was then about that day or day after school, about 30 white men actually, and they were like 18, 19 from different schools, came up with like baseball bats and hammers attempting to beat me up. Yeah. So that was like my first encounter of like racism.
You're 15, you're running for some local school position.
Not school, no, so this is it's national.
The youth parliament.
Yeah, youth
parliament. Oh, the youth parliament, right, okay.
Yeah. So literally,
I'm really shocked.
Yeah, and also Birmingham, because there's a like, I don't know, we're in Birmingham, so I have
Let's not say it's multicultural and like it's all diverse and all of those. We have our pockets.
Yeah, we have our pockets.
No,
Unfortunately.
but Birmingham, well, it's an interesting one because I found that before, I don't know what I find that you always find a correlation between like the economy of the country and people's sentiments. Because obviously under the Labour government previously, you know, we all know school was good. You got your £30 EMA if you went to school. Like the economy was, youth services were in abundance. So what I found that in the same white friends or same people who are not black, we were all cool. Everyone was cool. Like it was not an issue. But as you find the rhetoric that started coming in of like the immigrants taking our jobs, it crept into school as well. So previously the year before in year 9 we were friends. In year 10 we're having race fights over race in the school. So literally, so then I remember a similar amount of time. By this time I wasn't really practicing. I had no kind of connection to Islam, even though my family were Muslim. It was never forced on me at all. So I had I really didn't really have no connection to Islam anyway. And then at the same time, I'm going through this kind of journey of self-discovery, trying to find myself more. I'm gifted by my best friend in school, who's a Muslim. He's half white, half from the Maldives. He gifted me the autobiography of Malcolm X. And bearing in mind, in schools, you are kind of taught this false dichotomy that good Martin Luther King, bad Malcolm X.
Malcolm X.
Yeah.
So that's what I was told. I was told that, you know, Martin Luther King is the lover, the peaceful person, and Malcolm X was a racist and a radical. So that's what I initially believed. Until I read it for myself, like, this is wrong. And then when I started campaigning in this it's all happened at the same time. I started campaigning in school again. And then my teacher said to me, Momodou, be more like Martin and be less like Malcolm. So my kind of connection to Malcolm X has been since literally 11 years ago now. So then around the time, then obviously I realized, oh wow, Malcolm X was a Muslim and he's proud about his faith. Started going to YouTube videos. I started connecting back into my faith a bit more, and that's kind of how I got into the kind of quote unquote black issues thing. But then, so that naturally, fast forward now, which probably is a good segue to some of our talking points. I get into the Muslim community thinking that, you know, you believe the thing of like, you know, I was talking about today, I'm going to make a post actually, the Muslim starter pack or the non-black Muslim starter pack. Bilal was black, the last sermon and the Quranic quotes on justice, you know, and that's what everyone says.
That's it.
My own access to Islam was online at the time or certain people that I encountered. And I was like, okay, wow, this is wicked. You know, and Malcolm X, he believed in that dream. I guess I always say that it is a blessing or it is a divine intervention that he passed away when he did. If he was to live longer and see the racism in Muslim communities, who knows what he would have thought.
Yeah, because we talk about Hajj as, you know, and a lot of people use Malcolm X and say, look at Hajj and look at how perfect it is and everyone black, blue and everything is together. And while it's true in Hajj, a lot of it is because
it's not the same in society.
Yeah, it's not the same in society, but a lot of times we're packed in together. Firstly, I've seen firsthand in Hajj actually there is, and maybe actually in the 70s that's true, it wasn't, but now that Hajj has developed further and further, there is definitely a class division where you have some people in the really fancy tents and this and that, and they're really close and they're in a building. But also if you take those same people outside, it's not like there isn't racism in Muslim communities. You know, the Gulf has a huge problem.
Of course.
The way
I live in the Middle East, so Africa, but I live in Egypt, the majority, you know, Arab country, and I've experienced racism firsthand. I've experienced the colorism and the anti-blackness firsthand. But yeah, so then again, so I'm going through my life, discovering myself through Muslim community. I become quote unquote practicing, whatever that means. I start going to mosque, and I'm like, whoa, the stuff I'm reading in the books about like the process of being an anti-racist campaigner almost in that society, and I hear the stuff about I'm witnessing it in the people. People are coming up to me and saying, oh, so when did you convert to Islam? And I'm just like, other than the fact that you see that my skin color is black, what is giving you the impression that I'm a convert? Even though there's nothing wrong with being a convert, but why are you assuming that? I used to go to the mosque, like after I started studying. So when I started practicing, quote unquote practicing, I started studying Islam pretty soon after. I started going to lectures. I started, you know, taking a real kind of interest in it. And then I'm you know, going to the mosque at the 17, 18 years old. I'm having people coming to me, hello, assalamu alaikum, brother. Let me teach you how to make wudu. I'm like, huh? Like,
did you ever feel that was condescending or like,
of course, you know? I'm really, but because all it is, it's not like you come up to me and said to me, "Salamu alaikum, bro. how are you? Oh, how long you been Muslim for? Oh, you're new here, for example. Can I help you with anything? It's like, let me teach
There was
you.
no segue.
Yeah, let me
Like,
teach you
it's
your
just an
religion.
absolute assumption, like, you know.
He must know nothing. And then what I also saw, then now being amongst majority Pakistani or Southeast Asian communities, is that like blackness or being black was associated with being jahil or being non-Muslim. Whereas, like, again, I've had me during this work that I'm doing, I've had so many people asking me, am I black or am I Muslim?
Can you not be both?
But it's not even that. It's stupid because no Arab is being asked, are you Arab or are you Muslim? Yeah. And no Pakistani person or Indian person being asked, are you Pakistani or Muslim? No one's been asked this question. I'm being asked this question because, again, they've drawn a distinction between your race or your skin color and your religion.
Why do you think that is? I mean, sorry, go ahead, Taqib.
So yeah, so I mean, I've seen this where people say that. I saw this on, coincidentally, TikTok, which I try not to spend too much time on there, but there was someone who said that someone put a post out and said, "Oh, I'm not really black. I'm half Muslim. So I'm half Somali, half Muslim." And it's like, what's wrong with you? So there's this notion, but also this is not just non-Muslims perpetrating this, because there's a notion in this country. A lot of people assume that Islam is this ethnic Middle Eastern religion,
exactly.
Whereas actually it's global anyway. But also some Muslims perpetrate this myth and 100%. Say, "Oh no, if you want to be Muslim, you have to wear a thobe like me and have dates."
Exactly, yeah, exactly, all the time. Like, and it's shame because I've seen a lot of black people who have embraced so much self-hate of what it means to be black. But then I get it though, they say themselves. It's that thing of like, when you come from a certain background or a certain lifestyle, you believe that the only way to come to God is that you have to relinquish that lifestyle completely, which I get. But they don't. But I always say Islam is not culturally predatory. Islam is a filter for culture. The thing the thing that's good in that culture, Islam will let through. And sanction it. The things that Islam that is the antithesis to Islam or Islamic values or Islamic ethics, whatever they may be, Islam will say no to it. But again, because of people have this image of what it means to be black and the culturally black in society, therefore it must be antithetical to Islam. And I find it very strange. That's why, like, for me, I'm very like pro-black. I say very proudly, I'm a pro-black person, and I wear my blackness openly. And if that makes you uncomfortable, then exactly. And if that makes you uncomfortable, then you have work to do, not me. Because again, similarly, it's irony being majority of my friends in Birmingham are not black. Majority of my friends in general are not black. But again, just saying how, like, for Eid, I can wear a hat from my friend who's Pashtun. He has a hat which I love. I call it the Pashtun hat. Or similarly, how my friend wears shawal khamis, I'll wear sometimes. And even though all my friends who are not black have been to Africa with me. You know what I mean? Like, we've had no issues in my immediate circle, but it's when you go to wider Muslim circles, you find issues with these kind of things.
I mean, there's a general kind of, and I want to bring into something kind of, it's a bit unrelated, but it's a lot of Muslims talk about this, and it's a very common thing is, oh, we'll talk about Bilal, and Bilal was the best, and we have a Sahabi, and everything's great. Islam is all about equality, and then it comes, okay, but if your daughter wants to marry Bilal, would you be okay with it? And there's a big kind of divide when it comes to marriage. No, we're not going to touch that. Everything else, okay, but it's just complete kind of a dichotomy or a cognitive dissonance.
It's like someone, one of the scholars in Birmingham said that we have masjids called the Masjid of Bilal, but if Bilal radiallahu anhu came today, he couldn't even be on the committee of that masjid, he couldn't be on that board. But again, it's like even that, I've always said that we have to move away from the tokenization of Bilal. You know what I mean? Bilal was not the only black companion. Do you know what I mean? You know what I mean? He's like, this tokenization. Oh my God! And this is why Mustafa Briggs, who's my best friend, does he does Beyond Bilal. And that was literally, because I get it. The Muslim response always is that, oh, how can I be racist? I'm Muslim and Bilal was black. Can you name any other black companion? Nope.
Can you name any other black scholar?
Exactly. That's the problem.
Surely that's just the same as I have a black friend. Like, Islam has a black friend.
That is the Muslim. I have a black friend. That is the Muslim. I have a black friend. Exactly.
And I think a lot of Muslims have this cognitive dissonance where they do accept that there's no difference in Islam between Arab and Ajam, but then it's accepted within communities through either jokes or things like that. Do you think, especially, I mean, I'm coming from a Pakistani background, a lot of people say this, and again, I've seen no evidence for this, but a lot of people say that actually the root of racism in Asian communities is colonial, is that we came from white masters, and it's like, no, it existed way before this.
The fact of the matter is, if you look at a lot of Hinduism scriptures, they had a caste system which existed, and that existed on differentiating people on skin color.
Does it still not exist?
No, of course it exists. But my point is that I find a lot of Southeast Asia, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure maybe it's possible that colonialism exacerbated the problem. It might be true, but to say that we had no racism until colonials came, that's a lie.
Yeah, and it's also it's another way of kind of farming out your problem, right?
It's deflection.
Yeah, you're saying it wasn't me; it was actually these white people who came and did it.
Exactly.
But this, so I get this, bringing it back to the discussion in the UK. What I've heard frequently in the UK is that slavery, and there's a book by Jonathan Brown called Slavery in Islam where he talks about this. He says that in some circles, the way, or in a lot of white circles, the way even the discussion on slavery is had is that actually this is not something we do. We are civilized, and in Britain we outlawed it in 1810. By paying the money. Actually, you paid the money to loads of white settlers.
You paid the money to the slave owners.
Yeah. So you made them really rich, and we spent hundreds of years paying that off. But this is a uniquely Muslim problem. That's actually North Africans who do slavery, or that slavery is something the Muslims were the ones, the Arabs of North Africa were the ones who captured slaves, and they were the primary ones to do it. And they use examples like the fact that Mauritania was the last
country to
on record to outlaw slavery. So what do you kind of say in response to that from a Muslim perspective, where actually Islam is being painted in sometimes, I'm not sure if this is true in, like, if I can say generally the white psyche, but there's a lot of statements saying that Islam is actually an anti-black religion.
I wouldn't say Islam is an anti-black religion, but the thing is, what I could not be intellectually dishonest. So when I have black people who maybe not as well read on the history of Muslim majority countries, they will say that they will go over and say to other black people who are Christian, and they will say, and rightfully so, they will say, how can you follow this religion? That this religion was used to enslave you. Yeah. And it was. Mm-hmm. But then similarly, I can look in Islamic textbooks and know that they will research the Zand rebellion under the Abbasids. Zand rebellion was a group of black people who rebelled against the Abbasids. Yeah, you have fatwas saying that Muslim women should not wear hijab or niqab. Black Muslim women should not wear hijab or niqab because they're undesirable in society. You have fatwas in society that say that the fatwas from earliest court sources that state that a black Muslim woman doesn't need a wali to get married because she struggles to get married. You know what I mean? You have so many. These are in Islamic texts. And I've read them, and again, I've read them because I have access to the Arabic. Yeah. Again, I totally agree saying this. It's not Islam that says this, but you have similarly, they have a whole group, have whole empires who used to castrate black young men, and these are majority Muslim empires. 40% of those slaves that were taken, those Africans that were taken as slaves from Africa, were Muslim. Not a peep from the Ottoman Empire that spoke about it.
Sorry, Hamdi, did you have a question on that point? Or?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you guys are using very large words that are just flying over my head. What does castrate mean, and what does cognitive dissonance mean?
No, sorry.
I'm just there thinking, like, this is not a conversation for my intellect at this minute. I'm just gonna like nod.
No, at all. So castrate is when it was the practice that you remove the genitals of males.
Okay.
To make them eunuchs, and so basically they become just slaves and have no desires, basically.
And a lot of people say that this is a uniquely American thing, American slavery thing, but that's not true. So there's a scene in Django Unchained where it's actually like they're about to do it to Django, and it's very graphic. But actually, this is something that was a punishment, even though Islam outlawed it, but a lot of people didn't follow through with it. I think. Oh, sorry. The other thing is that cognitive dissonance is when you believe something, but you act in a different way, or you act upon something else. But sorry, we did segue quite a bit. I get very interested in this, and this is why I've been following your post for some time. But let's bring it back to kind of your background. And so you got involved into activism through that. I forgot to mention at the intro that you have your podcast as well, Muslim Millennials podcast.
Yeah, and the Baraka Boys podcast.
And the, sorry, what?
Baraka Boys podcast.
Baraka Boys podcast. So yeah, so you're kind of older in the podcasting game than we are at the Middle West. But I wanted to bring it back to kind of the UK context and white structural racism, right? So again, there's a big kind of, I think there's movements in the US who disagree about and say that, white privilege doesn't exist, etc. But actually in the UK, and bringing it specifically to us, there's a big claim that actually police brutality here isn't as bad as it is in the US, and we don't really have a problem here.
Yeah, I mean, I've been speaking about this all morning. The only difference is, well, two differences, sorry. Yes, it's not as bad as America. I admit that. I said it publicly. But again, our police officers on the street are not armed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and that kind of infuses a completely different personality. Can you imagine, like, when the police officer in the UK is confronted with a situation, they know very well it can go left. If I cannot physically overpower this person, I could get a chance of getting my ass kicked. Yeah. In America, it's very much like I can shoot you from a distance. And it's very telling because I visited America just September, just gone. And I've been before, but I went and I've visited about 5 or 6 different major cities. So I went to Philadelphia, I went to New York, Boston, Baltimore, and Delaware. And I was just shocked to see how the police operate in those places. They really act like a gang. They really come in and intimidate people. Like literally, I witnessed it myself. Whereas in the UK, given again there is structural racism in the UK, and there have been many who've died in the police of custody of the police, but not as much in America. But one thing I can say is that in my own experience, and by the way, I've had many negative experiences with the police here, yeah, and it kind of infuses I don't really trust the police, yeah. But to be fair, they are overall friendly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just being honest. They're overall friendly in the UK. Like you go to a shop, you're in a chicken shop or a fast food shop or whatever it may be. Police officer will come in and buy his food and say hello to everybody.
Yeah.
You know, say good afternoon, see you in the street. They'll say hello to you. Yeah, it's not in America. It's very much they come in and they're just like mean mugging people. They have a gun on the side of in their holster, and very much they come across very aggressive. I noticed that straight away.
There's a thing in, I think, another movie called Righteous Kill where he says, Al Pacino says, most people respect the badge, everybody respects the gun. And that seems to be, I guess that's a wider attitude problem with them. I guess this kind of brings us on to some of the things about the way, as a Muslim, you kind of engage with that sort of society. So what do Muslims have a duty to do in terms of, for example, arming themselves or protecting themselves, or in our case, training ourselves in martial arts or that kind of thing, when there's a genuine threat to kind of something happening to you?
I'm someone who always believes, and like, you know, I don't believe in the narrative that's pushed today. Islam is not a pacifist religion. Islam doesn't say, you know, turn the other cheek no matter what. Islam doesn't say, you know, slap me 10 times. I don't do it. You know, no, I don't believe that. You know, I believe, as Malcolm X said, and people say he's advocating violence. It's not by any means necessary. So if the situation demands that you have don't break the law, you know, get a gun in America where guns are legal, then yeah, if you can, have a gun. Train yourself and get a license to carry. If you're in the UK, you know, you should be able to defend yourself, especially for Muslim women. Especially Muslim women, you know, people have issues of Muslim women taking up martial art lessons. I think that's ridiculous. In a time where you see that women are getting sometimes their hijabs be ripped off, of course you'll be able to defend yourself.
I mean, I want to go back to what you said like a few moments ago about how you don't feel like you can trust the police. Yeah. Do you feel like that's a sentiment that all Black African people or people within the minority community feel like? And why do you think there is such an erosion of trust that we have to this state that is meant to be actually protecting everyone?
Because the thing is, I mean, those who are like not even like studious in the sense, but those who just have conceded the reality know that there's injustice done to ethnic minorities, particularly Black people. Like you're more times, like how many times more likely you are as a Black person to be stopped and searched. You know, we know, for example, like we know that Black people and white people use drugs about the same amount. Black people overwhelmingly are represented in the justice system for drug offences. Yeah, we know, for example, if police were to police the hood in Black majority hoods and hoods in the UK, as they were to police these festivals that are run by white people, you find the same amount of drugs there, but they're not.
Yeah.
So we just see
different approaches,
and then now we see the attitude when you are confronted by a police officer as a Black male, the attitude is really different as you are as a white person. That's just known. I mean, I've had like, I remember being, not to be so like, you know, anecdotal, but I remember being like 13 and being 13, and I had a teacher training day, so I went to go Oxford Circus, and then like had a encounter police officer, and the way he just treated me, I thought like, what the hell is wrong? Like he even said to me, what's your name? I said, Momodou Taal. He goes, that's not your name. I said, why is not my name? He goes, because Taal is a Dutch word and my mother is Dutch. I was like, okay.
But how can that not be your name?
Exactly. Like again, just encounter of the police. I've had so many. You just know they're gonna be overbearing. They're gonna be aggressive many times. So for me, one of the things I thought, you know what? So again, to people who see this stuff on the ground, we see that the police do not police people fairly. That's why there's not a trust there.
Okay, I think I've heard the statistics that you used before about Black people being more likely to be stopped and searched than white people. For me, I understand the logic and I understand the stats, and I'm not arguing with the stats. Yeah. But for me, I'm not a stats person, so I can't put it into like a physical, like an image of how that looks like. Can you break that down to me? Because when I hear that, I'm like, damn, why they're doing that to Black people? But I actually can't like make that connection.
Because what it is the attitude that comes with it. So, for example, the perception of many white people that Black people are criminals. Mm-hmm. Black people again, but we know, like, and you know, you can go and talk this nonsense claim of black and black crime, which is nonsensical. We can destroy that. We can tear that apart very often if you like.
Agreed.
But the thing of this perception of like Black people are somehow inherently more inclined to do crime.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, we must use our powers more so on these people. When again, I told you, if you were to police Black people the same way you police white people, you'll find the same amount of drugs.
Mm-hmm. You'll
find white people, they do cocaine, they pop pills, they have all these events that have drug-filled parties. You know, you find the same amount. You find, my point is that there's not a group of people that does more crime.
Mm-hmm. It's how police.
But the narrative that speak, an example, America is a good example. I don't want to keep talking about America, but America is a good example. In the 90s, when there was a crack epidemic in America, which we know the CIA flooded many of the ghettos with crack, the narratives were that these are disgusting people, they're criminals, and they introduced the free strike rule, which meant if you get caught 3 times, you get life in prison. That kind of destroyed the Black family. Now in 2020, we have an opioid epidemic amongst who? Middle-class white people. What's the narrative surrounding it? It is a mental health issue. They must be taken to rehab. My point is, what happened with the crack epidemic? My point is this: for me, I take a consistent stance. Anybody who's a drug addict, you need mental help. You need
rehabilitation.
Medication. Yeah. You're not a criminal.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why issue kind of thing.
So I guess one of the things is again, US is very easy to and actually I guess the blessing of Trump has been that the dichotomy is very easy to see. Yeah, exactly. It's very laid bare because there was April 30th, there were people predominantly white protesting against the lockdown, and Trump was out there saying, these are good people who are very angry. And then
these are very fine people.
Yeah, these are very fine people who are very angry. Yeah. And then on the kind of 2-3 weeks down the line, you have Black people protesting. Again, really it's the same thing, right? These are very fine people who are angry about something terrible that happened. And yet
this time they're referred to as thugs.
Yeah, and this time, and the responses, I think from the media perspective as well, like there have been some very clear things where I think there was on Twitter, there was a famous personality who said, New York is burning and look at what these thugs are doing to us. And then someone else who was a more left-wing commentator said, I live in the same building as you. I just went outside. Everything's fine. But in the UK, we've seen this with things like where there's already conversation about these protests are going to be a cause of spreading COVID, or where Eid was celebrated. And generally Muslims tended to celebrate Eid in a very socially distant way. We didn't have mosques. A lot of people put out something that, you can pray at home. Whereas when VE Day came along, Victory in Europe Day, there was a lot of rallies on the streets. And again, they weren't very socially distant, but nobody covered that.
So the whole sentiment of blaming the Black community and the brown community for their problems, it's the same sentiment that we're seeing, that where the brown people and the Black people are involved, they're then blamed for what happens to them.
Yeah. And the thing is, look, imagine this. I saw a beautiful sign that we know, especially in America and in the UK, we know that if you're from a Black and ethnic minority background, you're more likely to die from coronavirus.
Yeah.
Stats show that very clearly. The own government's damning report has exposed them. Yeah. And in all of that, black people and brown people are still taking to the streets. What does that say about how they feel about the situation?
They're willing to risk their lives.
Exactly.
Literally, yeah. I guess I want to kind of, as we wrap up, I want to bring, I wanted to, oh, well, actually, no, let's, I think you talked about black on black crime, and you said we can unpack that. So I wanted to get a little bit of a perspective on that, because again, that's something that's mentioned a lot. And I think 2 Ramadans ago in Birmingham, we had a big story around this, because 2 people were shot dead. Or stabbed, I think, actually it was stabbed in Birmingham, and they happened to both be Muslim. And again, this whole story came out of, you know, Muslim gangs in Birmingham. And a lot of it is basically that narrative on black crime.
You know, it's the reason why I say it's nonsensical, because first of all, it should never be used as a response to people who are experience oppression from the police officers. When people say, for example, oh, but you know what it sounds like to me when I hear this, yeah. Okay, police kill you, therefore we can, because you lot kill yourselves, we can now kill you too. That's what it sounds like. It's like this. It's like saying if a woman who had received or been the victim of rape or sexual assault, it's like you saying in that moment of her telling you that, you said, well, what were you wearing? That's what it sounds like.
That is the very conversation that happens.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. And that's disgusting. That's so odious and disgusting to have that discussion. Now, that's just how I feel about it. We know for a fact most violent crimes that are committed by people you know. People who are victims of violent crimes happen by people you know, or people who are in your area. Naturally, when you have areas of pockets that are all black or all Asian or all white, they're going to be by people of your own, people who look like you. There's not an overwhelming number of crimes committed by black on black people or white and white people. It's about the same. There's not like a big difference between the numbers. Yeah. Second of all, again, it's the narrative of black people have been given that they are more disposed to violence. When, please name me one black mass shooting in America. Name me one. It hasn't happened.
Nope.
No.
Do you know what I mean? So like how this image that black people are more violent, but at the same time, yes, inner city crime is an issue. But we know when you have like defunded schools, you have lower economic backgrounds, we know that crime normally follows that pattern. Yeah. But my problem is that people, a lot of the, and I've seen many Muslim social media talk about black on black crime as well as a response, which I think is disgusting. But I find that many Muslims here, they're only talking about the symptoms, but not the causes.
They're not talking about the root causes and how to address them.
Why talk about how this society, these communities are defunded, how the creation of ghettos in these places, how crime normally follows this pattern when you have like lower economic backgrounds. People find it as a way out. So again, talk about all these issues and then talk about, yes, at the same time, there's a real issue of people who look like you, kill you as well. And I get that because I know, as Akala beautifully says, he says that, you know, many young black people have internalized self-hate. And that's a real issue.
Yeah.
And when you predict that self-hate, you get that on people who look like you more than, like, you know, Akala said he went into prison and did like a test with young black people and said that, you know, who do you think more likely to be successful? And you show a picture of black person, white person, and black people will choose white person. Like, what does that say about a system? What does that say about a system? What is it done to its young black people in that society for them to internalize so much self-hatred? So much so, you even deem the life of someone who doesn't look like you more worthy than your own. But again, no one's had that conversation. Everyone's had a conversation of black and black crime because it's a right-wing talking point.
I think for me personally, why people don't have those conversations is because it becomes uncomfortable, because then you have to then look at why is it that these schools are being underfunded. It's because you're voting for governments and you're voting for policies that make those schools are underfunded. And then it's like you're looking at then how you have benefited from that privilege. For example, I use my own like living circumstances. I live in an affluent area in Birmingham, and I say to my friends and I say to everyone that I meet, had I had lived in a different postcode, I would be a different person. Had I not gone to the same school and been presented with the same opportunities, because I went to a school in an affluent area, but when I was going to that school, it was mostly majority like Pakistani and whites and that kind of thing. So then for me, looking at my own privilege and my own like circumstances, I can then see why there is black on black crime, because you are in an area where systemically you are demonized and put down and don't have the same opportunities as anyone else. So then for another person who lives in a different postcode to then say, well, you're killing yourself because that's your own fault.
Yeah.
That's not nothing to do with me.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
I wanted to bring before we wrap up is we touched on some things right at the start, and and we did a previous episode where again the guest said this, is that Islam is perfect and Islam isn't racist. There's a we started the conversation about kind of Muslim racism, and a lot of the time when you actually criticize, I know you've been at the center of some kind of beef around this, when you criticize a historical Muslim scholar or call out their bias, which doesn't negate their work, for example.
Yeah.
It's just that they're the product of their times.
Yeah.
There's a big discussion around in Islam. Very soon after the Prophet's death, there was a switch towards kind of, or like when there was a switch towards a hereditary or sultanate type ruling system, there was actually a fair amount of racism that was espoused by some people in senior positions at the time. How do you reconcile that as a kind of as a Black Muslim, hearing things? And for me, actually, to a lesser extent, this comes through because a lot of the things those people say are very clearly at Black people, but also a lot of those things are the superiority of Arabs. And then you take that back and you go, well, how do I kind of fit into all of this? And a lot of people, and a lot of people who are non-Arabs, they feel kind of almost like they don't fit, because it's a very common opinion out there, which is one of the reasons why actually we have Somali mosques and we have Pakistani mosques and things like that, is because actually some of the Arab mosques aren't going to accept us.
But at the same time, you know what I found?
The Pakistani mosques,
you have two camps. You have the camp that has accepted, you have those camps who are not even Arab who accept the narrative. Yeah, I've come across many Pakistanis, not Pakistanis only, many Black people who say, yes, it's true, the Arabs are superior. They accept the narrative. I've heard that. And you have those who I put myself in the second camp, but I guess that I don't want to be what they call moral presenteeism, which means that I don't believe in projecting our notion or understanding of morality onto the past, because they were a different time. But I have no issue of calling it out. I'll say they were wrong, but I know why they said it. I have no issue with that. But my issue is not even with so much them saying it, because again, they had a different time to me. My issue is those who in the 21st century will say that they're still right in what they said. That's my issue.
That use that back a day morality to then excuse and to sort of say this is what we need to be continuing to do.
Yeah, exactly. That's my issue.
Because I think in the Muslim community, we very much look up to and we put on a pedestal our shaykh and our scholars for a right reason. But what we also forget is that they were also human beings.
Exactly.
And that we then need to sort of look at what they did, the good that they did, and look at our time and how we can also move forward from what they did and continue it for future.
Exactly. And also the other extreme as well, which I don't agree with, but I don't agree with throwing them all away. So I still believe if a scholar made a racist view, I will still take benefit if it's benefit in his work on Islamic jurisprudence, for example, or his work in hadith. I think I still benefit from it. By his comments on the Black people or race, I put it in the bin. I don't agree with throwing the baby with the bathwater. So again, I don't believe in the two extreme. One saying that therefore he was an Islamic scholar, he must have been righteous, must have been right. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in saying we throw him all out completely. I believe in something in the middle.
I think that brings into some of the things that there's if you call out people, especially like white people in the modern day, on things like white privilege, or say that actually what you just said was an incredibly racist statement, it's viewed as no, but I'm not a bad person.
Yeah. Whereas actually, on them as an individual.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's just a bias. You can be a good person and have a bias that's actually even unconscious.
Exactly. And you might not realize why. And the whole point, what I love about this whole movement in recent times, that I really love the education process that people are going through in this. Having many people who are Muslim, who are not Black, basically many non-Black people in general, were telling me that, you know what, this has been educational for me. I didn't even realize I had these prejudices inside me. I didn't realize I was biased in this way. I didn't realize, because sometimes you think to yourself, how can you even come out with this statement? Like how can you even come out with this statement? Like in 21st century, you have access to so much, but then you realize not everyone goes through the same educational process. And again, this is my privilege that I've been able to go through that process.
Because I think what we need to understand as Black people is that we're coming from this with decades of learned experience of unconscious bias and a lot of learning to deal with people looking at our appearance. And then right now people are just automatically now waking up from this movement saying, look, wow, I've got unconscious bias. And I think it's reference to me, it's that little anger and it's that annoyance of, why did you not already know this? And I need to, and then it comes back to us as like, we need to also check our own privilege, because we are more in terms of like a bit more further along in that thing. But I wanted to ask a question about the Muslim community being anti-Black. Is how do you see the Muslim community moving forward? Because I love the new conversations that we're having, and I love the fact that we're being a bit more open in calling out the unconscious bias that there exists. But what is it going to look like moving forward? You know what I mean?
I definitely feel, alhamdulillah, it's slow progress, first of all, but I think the younger generation is in a much better place. Because again, we're just more mixed now. We're more mixed online, we're more mixed in different spaces. Like, you know, you get I don't know, but maybe not, I don't know about yourself, but I know for myself and my people around me, our friendship circles are so mixed now.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon, as my friends who are Pakistani and Arab have come to Gambia with me several times. They've been Senegal with me. I go to their houses. And again, I feel like it's starting. It's just slow. Yeah. So I feel like what I would like to see is a continuation of that. People just getting to know each other more, man. James O'Brien today on the LBC said that the irony being the areas that are the most kind of racist and prejudiced towards non-Black people are places that don't have non-Black people in them.
Yeah, so if you go to like Devon,
don't have non-white people in them. For example, they have white majority areas that have never encountered Black people, and they're the most people say they're the most racist, and the most people who say that we're you know, these people are taking our jobs. When you never even encountered those people. Because why? Because the narrative around in those places has been fueled that kind of those fans kind of thing. They fueled those flames. Whereas like places like London and Birmingham, which are more so mixed, don't have the same issues.
Yeah, and it's like almost a fear of the unknown, or
exactly.
If you go to Devon, you're almost invariably going to get a comment.
Yeah.
Or even you don't have to venture too far from Birmingham. Like, you know, my wife works in Worcester, and one of the things she says is, you know, lovely people, but some of their questions are just frustrating because like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So I guess this has been really interesting and really enlightening for us. I think there's a lot of tangents we can go off on. But as we come to nearly the close of this, I want to ask you on some takeaway points, especially in terms of how do we take concrete steps in tackling what is most likely to be Arab or Asian or Indian Pakistani privilege in our Muslim community in general, and especially in our like mosque communities, things like that.
I'll say, I think the biggest thing I've got to say is when it comes to majority Muslim spaces, include Black people in your planning, in your events, in your messaging. When you have an event and have a panel, what does the people on panel look like? You know, when you're going forward in policy, having youth groups, include Black faces. That's the biggest thing I can say. You know, unless if you're really about it, really about making a change in these majority, you know, single ethnic communities. If you want to make a change and you say you're serious about it, include Black people in these places and spaces.
Yeah, and I think that's something concrete that can be done to, because one of the things is that a lot of people are jumping on this, and everyone and their dad basically is putting a black picture up on Instagram. Yeah. I don't know if people's dads are on Instagram, but yeah, but basically
they
a lot
are,
of people,
they're woke.
Yeah. So they're doing it, but actually, how do you take this forward? So I guess that's something definitely take away from Mosque Committee's perspective. And any last points for our listeners in general? Anyone out there listening?
There's so many. I mean, the thing I just said, this could be a conversation for hours, and I'm sure I'm glad that the recent protests have been in kind of, or the death of George Floyd has been a catalyst for these discussions globally. But ultimately, I'll just say that, you know, listen to Black people. We've been trying to say this for a long time. Now, our voice at the forefront again. Just listen to Black people when they're talking, and just come off like, you know, and save yourself some trouble. If you're unsure, I get it. For me, there's only two sides now. There's the oppressor and the oppressed. There's a sign of justice and injustice. But if you're unsure of what to say, don't put your foot in it and don't say anything. Go to a black person and say to them, how does this sound? I'm thinking of saying this. Honestly, I have to be fair. There is some really well-meaning people out there, well-intended people, and they come up with some absolute nonsense. I saw one influencer said that, even animals have rights. Therefore, black people have rights. I'm like, oh my God.
You've just compared black people to animals.
Like, I mean, and she was so well-meaning. But again, it's like, if you want to get involved and you know what to show what to say, get in contact with people who do know what to say.
Yeah, appreciate that.
Can I end with saying something?
Yeah, for sure.
A friend of mine, that reminds me of something that a friend of mine told me a few years back. She, in her PhD study, when she was interviewing refugees, she said that someone told her how, don't expect when you are asking for my story, don't feel entitled to it, but rather feel grateful that I'm telling you that story. And I think when you said talk to the black people, like, don't come from a place of, I don't know, privilege, what you're saying, I need to know this because I'm entitled to it, but more of an essence of just saying, listen, really, I'm coming from a place of sincerity and curiosity. How does this sound like?
Agreed.
Very nice.
Thank you so much for this.
Yeah, no, appreciate your time. Really appreciate you coming on, especially with your schedule going over and joining other interviews. People can find you on Twitter at Momodou Taal.
The Gambian on Instagram. And Momodou Taal on Facebook.
On Facebook, and you can find our podcast on at the Middle West PC on Twitter, at the Middle West Podcast on Instagram, and Facebook. And you can listen to this podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We're always looking for feedback, next guest recommendations, what you liked, what you didn't like, any engagements with these. You can send your feedback on podcast@themiddlewest.co.uk, or you can send us a voice note through the Anchor podcast app. And hopefully we look forward to seeing you very soon with another episode of The Middle West. Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all.